I have been in bad situations before, really bad ones. The kind where your hands go cold and your brain starts running faster than your legs. But lying face up in a glowing jungle on a planet that smelled like rain and burned metal, watching 3 moons slide past each other in the purple sky, I felt strangely calm. My dropship was in pieces somewhere behind me. My communication device was giving me a soft, steady error tone, and the nearest human being was approximately 40,000 kilometers away, give or take. I sat up, brushed a large iridescent bug off my shoulder, and opened my ration pack. Chicken flavor. Of course it was chicken flavor. It was always chicken flavor. My name is Marcus Cole, Sergeant, Terran Marine Recon Division. 12 years of service across 9 planets. I have been shot at, chased, dropped into hostile territory without a proper map, and once bitten by something that did not have a name yet. None of that had prepared me for what happened that afternoon in the jungle of Vethara 4th. I heard crying. Not an alarm, not a distress beacon, not the grinding sound of a damaged machine. Just crying. Small and quiet, almost swallowed by the hum of the jungle around it. I stood still for a moment. I told myself it was probably an animal, that Vethara 4th had 100 species that made sounds humans would recognize, that I should stay focused on getting to the extraction point. Then I heard it again, and I started walking toward it. The jungle opened into a small clearing, where a crawler vehicle had toppled sideways down a ridge and come to rest against 2 enormous tree trunks. It was a light scouting vehicle, the kind the Veth used for border surveys. Half of it was buried under a fall of loose rock and snapped branches. And pinned under the edge of the chassis, unable to move, was a young Veth female. She was conscious. Her eyes, which were large and a very pale amber color, were fixed on something at the edge of the clearing. I followed her gaze. 3 Karath, Vethara's apex predators, broad-shouldered and low to the ground, were moving slowly through the tree line. They had not committed yet. They were watching, waiting for her to stop moving. I did not think very hard about what happened next. Thinking too hard in those moments is what gets people hurt. I pulled a flare from my belt and lit it, which surprised the Kareth enough to make them flinch back. Then I put my shoulder against the crawler's chassis and pushed. It was heavy. It was enormously heavy. I pushed anyway. My boots slipped in the wet soil, and I dug them in and pushed harder. And something shifted, and the girl pulled her leg free, and I stepped between her and the tree line, and lit a second flare, and threw it directly at the nearest Karath. They left. That is the short version. The girl could not put weight on her leg, so I helped her sit against the tree trunk and checked it quickly. Not broken, just badly compressed. She was staring at me the whole time with those pale amber eyes, completely silent. The Veth have 4 arms, which means their body language is more complicated than ours, and I was not trained in reading it, but even I could see that she was frightened, and also, slowly, becoming something else, something more careful and attentive. She said something in Veth. My translation device, somehow undamaged in the crash, caught most of it. The word it gave me was, oath-bound. I did not know what that meant. I smiled at her and said, "Can you walk if I help you?" She looked at my translator for a moment, then back at me, and she nodded. Her name was Saelina. She was 22 in Veth years, which made her roughly equivalent to someone in their late teens by human reckoning. She was a survey technician, outmapping the eastern ridge when the ground had given way under her crawler. She had been there for 4 hours before I found her. It took 3 days for extraction to arrive. My communication device came back online the evening of the first day, damaged but functional enough to send a position signal. I told Command I was alive, that I had a civilian in my care, and that I needed pickup. Command told me they had 2 other situations in the sector, and I was the least urgent. I told them that was fine. It was fine. Vethara 4th was genuinely beautiful, in a way that felt personal, like it was showing off. The bioluminescent plants began to glow softly at dusk, turning the jungle floor into something that looked like a city seen from very high up. Saelina sat across from me on the first night, and watched my face while I watched the light, and when I caught her looking she did not look away. She seemed to be studying something. I shared my ration bars, which she found deeply suspicious at first, then ate without complaint. I showed her how to play a simple card game, using a worn deck I kept in my pack. She learned the rules in about 4 minutes, and beat me twice in a row, which was embarrassing. I told her so. She made a sound that I think was something close to a laugh. She taught me things too. The Veth have a form of memory song, a kind of melody that carries navigational information encoded into its rhythm. It sounds like a morning song. It is beautiful, and a little heartbreaking, and the two qualities are apparently not an accident. She said her people found it easier to remember things that made them feel something. I thought about that for a long time that night, sitting with my back against a warm stone, while the jungle breathed around us. On the second day, she told me about the oath bond. She explained it quietly, carefully, watching my face as she did. In Veth culture, saving a life creates what they call an unfinished thread. A life that would have ended has been continued by someone else's action, and that continuation belongs to both people now. The way to complete the thread was through bonding. Not just a thank you, not a debt to be repaid. Bonding, the permanent, legal, recognized kind. I listened to all of this without interrupting. When she finished, I asked her if she wanted more of the ration bar. She stared at me. I think she expected panic, or refusal, or laughter. What I felt was none of those things. What I felt was a very genuine respect for how seriously her people took a life that had been saved, and also a slightly complicated awareness that this was an unusual situation. The extraction team arrived on the third morning. Sayalina's clan arrived 30 minutes later. They came in 7 vehicles with a formal honor guard, and they were calm and organized and very serious. Behind them came an elder who introduced himself as High Keeper Aveth, who had the kind of stillness that comes from being extremely certain about everything. He explained the situation to my extraction team's bewildered lieutenant in careful, translated terms. I had completed the first half of the Veth bonding rite. The second half required confirmation. Until it was resolved, there was a cultural and legal matter that needed the attention of both parties. My lieutenant looked at me. I looked at the elder. The elder looked at me with the patient expression of someone who had never once been surprised by anything. I said, "I would like to attend the council, if that is permitted." The elder said, "You are the subject of the matter. You are required to attend." The Veth High Council met in a hall made of something that was not quite stone and not quite wood, a grown material that had been trained into walls and archways over what I was told was about 4 centuries. There were 17 council members seated in a curved arrangement, and the matter was presented formally, in the Veth way, which meant very slowly and with a great deal of established precedent. Half the council wanted to proceed with the rite. Half wanted to declare it void on the grounds that I was not Veth, that I had not understood the rite's meaning, and that a human sergeant was probably not a suitable subject for their oldest tradition. This second half included High Keeper Aveth, who had apparently reversed his own position after learning more about me, which I found both reasonable and slightly irritating. I was given a chance to speak. I stood in the center of the hall and spoke carefully, because the translator was working hard, and I did not want anything lost. I said that I respected their tradition completely, that I understood its purpose, which was to honor the weight of a life, and that I thought it was right to take that weight seriously. But I also said that a bond between 2 people that was only half chosen was not a real bond. That Sayalina had been afraid and in pain when she said the oath-binding word, and that a word spoken in fear was not the same as a word spoken freely. I was not refusing. I was saying the rite was incomplete, not because of what I had done, but because she had not yet had a chance to choose without fear. There was a long silence. High Keeper Aveth made a sound. I realized after a moment that it was laughter, deep and slow and entirely unexpected. He laughed for what felt like a full minute while the rest of the council watched him with varying degrees of alarm. He said, and the translator caught this perfectly, "The human has found the second choosing." The second choosing was a provision in the bonding rite so old that it had not been invoked in over 200 years. It allowed for a courtship period, 30 Veth days, during which both parties could learn about each other properly, and the one who had been saved could confirm or release the bond with full knowledge and free choice. My commander was not pleased when I requested a 30-day diplomatic posting extension. He used several words that are not worth repeating. The request was granted anyway, largely because no one at command headquarters could find a regulation that covered the specific situation, and the political relationship with the Veth was something no one wanted to damage over a sergeant's awkward paperwork. Those 30 days were not what I expected. I had expected formality, maybe a kind of careful performance on both sides. What happened instead was just life. Sayelina showed me her settlement, the survey office where she worked, the ridge she had been mapping when the accident happened. I sat with her family in the evenings while they talked, mostly about small things. I told her about Earth, about the city where I grew up, about the way old buildings there still had fire escapes bolted to their sides from a century ago, when people did not trust the walls. She found this very strange and very interesting. She was not delicate, she was precise. There is a difference. She asked direct questions and waited for direct answers, and when she thought I was wrong about something, she said so without softening it. I liked that more than I expected to. On the 29th day, a pirate faction hit the settlement. They were the same group that had damaged my dropship weeks earlier, a scattered and desperate operation that had been circling the sector, taking what they could find. They came in fast, and with enough force to make the Veth warriors respond in kind. I did not wait for permission. I went to work. The Veth fight with discipline and structure, organized movements and formations that are very effective and quite beautiful to watch. I fight like a human, which is to say I improvise, I use whatever is in reach, and I do not stop until the problem is solved. The pirate commander was a large and confident man who had not, apparently, accounted for the possibility of a Terran Marine emerging from a supply building with a fire extinguisher and what Highkeeper Aveth later described, in the official record, as troubling creativity. The settlement was secure within 40 minutes. 14 pirates were in restraints. Nobody on the Veth side had been seriously hurt. I was sitting on the ground, catching my breath, when Sayelina walked across the cleared space toward me. There was ash on her face, and her third arm was held slightly away from her side, protecting a bruise. She stopped in front of me and looked at me for a long moment, the way she had looked at me that first night, carefully, like she was reading something important. Then she spoke the second choosing, not in a ceremony hall, not in front of the council. Right there, in the ash and the settling dust, with the pale amber light of the settlement burning around us. Her voice was steady, her eyes were clear. I said yes. The formal ceremony happened 2 weeks later. Highkeeper Aveth officiated it himself. Just before he began, he pulled me aside and said something that I have not forgotten. He said that what made humans frightening, to those who watched them from a distance, was not their weapons, or their technology, or their adaptability, though all of those things were real. What made humans frightening was that they kept showing up. They survived, and then they stayed. They walked into situations that were not their concern, and they stayed until those situations were resolved, and then they stayed a little longer, just to make sure. He said this like it was a warning. I think it was also a compliment. With Aveth, it was hard to tell. I filed the most unusual combined report in Marine Corps history. There is a form for interspecies diplomatic incidents. There is a form for extended non-combat postings. There is, apparently, not a form for what I did, and so the records office in New Geneva had to create one. I heard it is now filed under a code that translates roughly to culturally significant personal event with ongoing strategic implications, which I find very funny. Tonight I am sitting on the ridge above the settlement. The bioluminescent jungle is beginning to glow below us. City lights seen from the air. Sayelina is beside me. She has her survey maps spread across her legs, and she is talking about the eastern plateau, pointing at elevation lines and explaining something about soil composition that I am only half following because mostly I am watching the light come up through the trees. I think about all the mission plans that did not include this. I think about the form that did not exist, and the regulation nobody could find, and the elder who laughed for a full minute in a 4-century-old hall. I think about a girl trapped under a crawler, and 3 predators at the edge of a clearing, and the decision that was not really a decision at all. I have always been better at improvising. It turns out some of the best things in a person's life work the same way.